So let's talk about a conflict that literally changed the world. This is the incredible story of how 13 small colonies decided to take on the biggest empire on the planet. And they weren't fighting for land or for money, no. They were fighting for a radical, brand new idea that people should be in charge of their own destiny.
It really all boils down to two huge ideas clashing head-on. On one side, you have a king who absolutely believed it was his God-given right to rule. And on the other, a nation waking up to the idea that they had the right to be free. Let's dig into how this epic collision of wills sparked a revolution.
Okay, so to really get this story, you've got to start with the king himself. We have to understand the man standing right in the middle of this historical storm, King George III.
This right here. This is the key to understanding how King George saw the world. He was a true believer in what's called absolute royal power. Now, what does that mean? Well, in his mind, his power was total. And the American colonies, they weren't partners, they were property, possessions to be managed for the good of Great Britain, period.
And look, this wasn't just some abstract idea he had. Oh no, it had real and frankly infuriating consequences for the people living in America. The crown just kept rolling out these acts to squeeze more money out of them and show them who was boss. First, the Stamp Act, taxing everything from newspapers to playing cards. Then the Townshend Acts slapped new taxes on all sorts of imported goods. And finally, the Tea Act, which basically forced them to buy only British tea. With every new law, the anger just kept building and building.
So you might be wondering, what did the colonists do about all this pressure? Did they just roll over and take it? Absolutely not. They started to get organized. They started to protest. And eventually, they started to fight back.
This simple phrase, this became the rallying cry for the entire movement. And it's so important to understand, this wasn't just about the money. Not at all. For the colonists, the idea that a government all the way across the ocean could tax them without a single one of their own representatives there to speak for them, that was a deep, fundamental insult. It went against everything they believed about their rights.
Everything was simmering. And then, in 1773, it just boiled over. The breaking point was an incredible act of defiance we all know as the Boston Tea Party. And let me tell you, this was no quiet protest. We're talking about colonists sneaking onto British ships in the middle of the night and dumping a fortune's worth of tea right into the harbor. This was the point of no return. The gloves were off.
Now, from the British point of view, the Boston Tea Party was just an outrageous act of rebellion. It couldn't be ignored. King George, feeling his authority was being directly spat on, didn't choose to negotiate. He chose to respond with overwhelming force. He sent his army to Boston to crush the rebellion. And with that move, any hope of a peaceful solution was gone. War was coming.
And it didn't take long. In April 1775, the first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord. The colonists knew they needed a leader, and they found one in a Virginia farmer named George Washington. Now, they were the clear underdogs against the mighty British Army. But a real game-changer happened in 1778. France, an old enemy of Britain, decided to jump in on America's side. That French help, with soldiers, ships, and cash, was absolutely crucial. And it all led to the final decisive victory at Yorktown in 1781, where the main British army had no choice but to surrender.
You know, what's so fascinating is that as the war dragged on, the reason for the fight started to change. This wasn't just about getting rid of some unfair taxes anymore. It was becoming a struggle to create something the world had truly never seen before. A brand new nation built on the ideals of freedom and the idea that people should rule themselves.
And the intellectual soul of this new nation was forged in one single, incredibly important year, 1776.
On the 4th of July, 1776, they did it. They signed the Declaration of Independence. You have to realize just how unbelievably bold this was. They weren't asking for reforms anymore. They were drawing a line in the sand, listing out everything the king had done wrong, calling him a tyrant to his face, and declaring to the whole world that they were now free and independent.
And inside that document, penned by Thomas Jefferson, is maybe the most powerful and world-changing idea ever written down. This idea, that we're all born equal, with rights that nobody can take away, was a complete rejection of the old world of kings and queens. It was the philosophical foundation for democracy as we know it, saying that power comes from the people, not from a king.
So when you look back at it all, you can really see this whole massive conflict through the eyes of two men who stood on opposite sides, two men who just happened to share a first name, King George III and George Washington. Let's take a look at how history remembers them.
And man, their legacies could not be more different. King George III goes down in history as the stubborn king who lost America, a symbol of an old way of ruling that was on its way out. George Washington, on the other hand, became the living symbol of this new republic, a true icon of freedom, a national hero who, after winning the war, became the very first president of the United States.
The fact that these little, scrappy colonies actually defeated the British Empire, well, that sent a shockwave across the entire planet. It taught people everywhere a very, very powerful lesson.
And that lesson is this: the desire for freedom is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. The American Revolution proved that when ordinary people get together for a cause they believe in, they can do truly extraordinary things. So the question that leaves us with today is, where in the world do we see that same spirit, that same fight for a better future, right now?